Hello and welcome to this episode of Happy Baking. It is winter where I live, and if you need help getting through the very coldest months of the year, you have come to the exactly right place. In this episode, I am going to be making delicious homemade marshmallows, two different kinds, a classic spongy homemade cut marshmallow, and also a delicious pipeable fluffy marshmallow that can be transformed into all different shapes. But marshmallows aren't enough. Of course, we need to make my famous silky smooth, creamy, hot cocoa to pair them up with. This is such a fun DIY project any time of year, but especially in the colder months when we need to stay inside. So grab your favorite mug and some nonstick spray, and let's get marshmallowing. First up, let's talk about classic cut marshmallows. Marshmallows are an aerated confection made by cooking sugar into a syrup and then whipping that warm sugar syrup and ultimately setting it with gelatin, giving it a soft, spongy texture. The difference between store-bought and homemade marshmallows, it's like, I can't even describe it. Homemade marshmallows are so delicious. And of course, you can also flavor them with whatever you like. I love adding vanilla bean paste or even sometimes honey into my marshmallows. It gives them just like a lovely flavor in addition to all that sweetness. Homemade marshmallows also toast so beautifully, creating this beautiful, almost creme brulee-like shattery shell on the outside whenever you apply heat to them. One of the most important things when working with marshmallows is to get yourself prepared ahead of time. This is always helpful when baking, but with marshmallows, we're working with gelatin. And gelatin really starts to set up quickly as it cools. So we want everything ready. You don't want to be whipping it and still be going and getting your pan ready or anything like that. We want to kind of be prepared from the get-go. And because this is a very sticky experience, it can be very helpful to have your nonstick spray on hand. Have it nearby, spray everything really well. I even like to spray my tools while I'm working, things like my silicone spatula, just to make sure that when I, go to scrape, it comes easily and it helps me keep working quickly. In short, nonstick spray is basically your best friend when you're making marshmallows. Don't try to skimp on it. I like to put a nice coating on the pan I'm going to be pouring the marshmallows into, as well as all of the hand tools I'm going to be using. And even some of the ingredients are sticky. So like this corn syrup, you can even use the nonstick spray to grease that container so it comes out easily when you're scaling it. If you don't use a lot of nonstick spray, you can kind of end up with a sticky mess. But don't worry, because marshmallow is just whipped sugar, it's actually really easy to dissolve it in hot water if anything does get a little out of hand or a little messy while you're working. First up, we need to bloom the gelatin in some cold water. This hydrates and softens it and makes it easier for it to melt when we add it to our marshmallows. This recipe has another sort of dreaded term that I know not everybody loves. It's at the end of the water. It says, comma, divided. Ooh. We need some water to bloom the gelatin, and then we need some to start cooking our sugar syrup. So just remember, we're gonna use about half the water to bloom the gelatin. We'll use the other half in our pot in a little bit. I've got my water here, and I'm just going to pour the gelatin kind of over the surface. The idea is to kind of cover the surface evenly because then it's going to hydrate more evenly. Okay, you can already see it starting to happen. The gelatin is starting to bloom with the moisture of the water. Now, one thing that can happen is if you don't have enough water, you can end up with some pieces that still look a little bit dry. If this happens to you, it's okay to grab a small amount of additional water and kind of use your fingertips to kind of splash it over the surface to help hydrate any dry pieces. If you don't hydrate all of the gelatin, you may end up with clumps in your marshmallows, and gelatin does not taste very good. Once it's fully mixed in, you don't taste it. You wouldn't necessarily know it's there. But if you get a piece of it, you may notice. So it's really important that we hydrate all of that gelatin. I'm gonna let it sit for 5 minutes. If it still looks a little dry after that time, I'll just add a little more moisture to help it get to that finish line. One of the most wonderful parts about marshmallows is that not a lot of ingredients are required to make them. So now that we need to make our sugar syrup, we just need a few more ingredients. I need some granulated sugar. That's the base of marshmallows. Marshmallows are really just whipped sugar, which is why we love them so much. The next ingredient we're gonna add is corn syrup. Now, before you get all up in my business, corn syrup. is not the same thing as high fructose corn syrup. And corn syrup plays an important role in a lot of baking projects, but especially confectionery work. I wrote a whole article about this. I'll link it in the video description below if you'd like to read more. And if you really don't want to use corn syrup, you can also use glucose syrup. That's less commonly available in the United States, but in lots of other countries, all of our international friends are probably already using it. So glucose for you, friends. The final ingredient is a little bit of water, just the water that we have left from blooming the gelatin. Before I even take this over to the stove, I'm gonna give it a nice stir. The goal here is kind of to mix the ingredients so they're evenly combined. It also starts to hydrate and dissolve the sugar a little bit. This decreases the risk of crystallization. Crystallization, when I'm talking about this, whenever you're cooking something that is in a crystalline structure like sugar, when the moisture starts to evaporate, it wants to go back to that crystalline structure. So we want to avoid that happening because marshmallows are light and fluffy. They're not gritty with crystals of sugar inside. So we're going to try to avoid crystallization at every stage that we can. And one of those ways is once we start applying heat to it, we don't want to stir this mixture. But right now, before we've applied any heat, it's okay to stir it. One of my professors from pastry school used to say, agitation promotes crystallization. So the more we stir it, once we start to apply that heat, it's going to encourage it to crystallize. But right now we can give it a little bit of a stir, make sure everything is as combined as possible, and then we need to take this over to the stovetop and start cooking it. Place your pot over medium heat, and you're gonna want a thermometer. So you can use a candy thermometer here, which attaches to the side of the pot, or you can use a probe thermometer. I sort of like that because my probe thermometer allows me to set the temperature that I'm going for, and it'll even beep and give me an alarm. That's just my favorite. Be very careful if you're using another kind of digital thermometer that you have to hold with your hand. Just remember, this is sugar syrup and it's going to be very hot. And I want you to be safe. This is happy baking. This isn't, I accidentally burned myself on sugar syrup baking. Once your pot is over medium heat, remember, you can still stir it, but only until it comes to a simmer. Once you see any kind of bubbling action, you want to be hands off with that sugar syrup, just monitoring the temperature. And if you notice any granules or crystals of sugar on the side of the pot, it's important to wash those away because those little crystals can get into your sugar syrup and sort of encourage it to crystallize. So right at the beginning part of cooking, I just always like to take a pastry brush dipped in some cool water and brush it around the sides. Boil the sugar syrup until it reaches 245 degrees Fahrenheit or 118 degrees Celsius on your thermometer. Then pour the hot sugar syrup into the bowl of an electric mixer fitted with the whip attachment. Okay, my syrup is in the mixer and I'm just gonna let it cool down a little bit. I wanna let it cool to about 220 degrees Fahrenheit or 108 degrees Celsius. While it's cooling, I can melt my gelatin. I usually just do this in the microwave, but you can also do it over a double boiler. The goal is just for the gelatin to be fluid. The syrup is cooled down, so it's time to whip it. I'm gonna just start by gradually raising the mixer speed. I eventually wanna be on high speed, but it's easier on your mixer if you do that a little bit gradually, one step at a time. We also don't want to risk sugar syrup that's hot still coming up at us, so going gradually also helps with that. Once I'm at that medium-high speed, I just wanna add the final two ingredients. We've got our melted gelatin and some vanilla bean paste or vanilla extract. I'm gonna keep whipping until this mixture is very aerated. It should be white and fluffy. It's gonna take about 6 to 8 minutes. The other big indicator is that the bowl, which feels very warm right now, will be cool to the touch. So as soon as it reaches that point, I wanna be ready to pour it right into my pan, so I need my greased spatula and maybe even a greased offset spatula to help me spread it into an even layer. Okay, it's very light and fluffy. My bowl is now cold enough that I can touch it. So let's just test it and see how fluffy it is. Yes. Okay, we gotta work quickly though, because it'll keep cooling. So the first thing I wanna do, I'm just gonna scrape the whisk, and again, I've got my spatula has been coated in nonstick spray. And again, this is a sticky mess. I know I keep saying this, but I have some people in my life who have some like sensory things and particularly hate stickiness. So I just want to point out that this kind of stickiness, it is just sugar. So it will dissolve with warm water. So like just soaking it in a bowl of warm water for a while is going to get all of that sticky stuff off without you even having to touch it. And then quickly, I've got this sprayed too, and I just want to use that to coax it to the edges. And then we're just gonna leave this to set. In order to set, it needs to cool completely. It's already cooled down a lot. I learned this from my friend Evan, who is like the marshmallow extraordinaire maker in my life. I used to kind of try to get this really smooth, but when she would pour her marshmallows, she would just kind of leave it, and it ends up making these like waves and nooks and crannies. And when you toast the marshmallow, then it toasts kind of differently. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I'm not gonna try to make this perfect and smooth in homage to her, and also because I really love eating it that way. I just wanna make sure I smooth it out enough that it gets to the corners of the pan. And see, you can already see this is already cooled down enough that when I try to touch it with the spatula, it's just sticking to it. So you really do have to work fairly quickly, but it doesn't need to be a difficult thing. Just be confident, dump it out, give it a quick spread, and now comes one of the hardest parts of this recipe, just waiting for it to cool. Okay, so it needs to sit for about 45 minutes to cool completely. If for some reason the pan doesn't feel cool to the touch, make sure you just let it go until that pan is cool. And of course, they can sit up to overnight if you wanna just kind of set them and forget them, come back to them the next day. So I'm gonna set these aside and let them firm up. Okay, these marshmallows have set up, and I can tell even because when I lift the parchment on the edge, they just like come right out as a slab. So it's time to cut them. The first thing I like to do is get a bowl with a generous amount of powdered sugar. Marshmallows that you buy in the store have sort of been dried and often do have kind of a coating. So we want to give them a little bit of a coating too. And confectioner's sugar helps coat the whole outside. It helps keep them dry, helps make sure that they don't stick together when you store them, all of that good stuff. So the first thing I'm gonna do is cut them into long strips, and then I'll cut those strips into squares. So to start this, I usually just kind of pick a point. I like big marshmallows. This is something else I learned from my friend Evan. Oh, by the way, my kitchen shears are greased with nonstick spray. If they aren't, you'll definitely have a bit of a trickier time cutting these mallows. Happy baking! And now I'm just gonna cut them into 1-inch squares, and I'm gonna let them fall into that powdered sugar. And after I get the whole strip cut, I'll toss them completely to coat, and then you can transfer them to any kind of storage container. You can also use them immediately, but this is such a fun project for a weekend or snowy day, and then you can enjoy marshmallows, you know, for many days or even weeks to come, because these hold really, really well. So I'll give them a nice toss. And you just want to make sure they're well coated, but they don't need to have a lot of excess on them either. So that's what they should look like when they are done. Aren't those beautiful? Like, imagine putting that in a cup of cocoa. We're going to. We're gonna put so many of them in so many cups of cocoa, and I'm gonna drink them. Look at our big, beautiful bag of marshmallows. It's really important to store your marshmallows in an airtight container. Usually the amount of powdered sugar that's left on them after tossing is enough, but you can always throw a little bit of extra powdered sugar in there just to make sure that they stay coated at all times. Like many confections, the enemy of this marshmallow is moisture. If they start to get wet, they will start to dissolve and deteriorate. Heat can also cause them to deteriorate. So just try to keep them at room temperature, but in a cool, dry place. And if you store them properly, they should last up to 3 weeks. And really, they're just pure sugar, so they can last even longer, but they're within their freshest and the best texture within the first 3 weeks. I can't wait to put them in some cocoa. Now let's talk about pipeable marshmallows. This is a little bit more advanced only because, as I said with the cut marshmallows, the mixture cools down quickly and is set with gelatin. So if you're not careful and moving fast, they can start to set up while you're working. But I've made this recipe have some changes in it to make it a little bit easier. The ratio for pipeable marshmallows is a little bit different. They're a little less spongy, but still decidedly fluffy. One of the ways I made this recipe a little bit easier is just by making it a smaller quantity. That way it cooks a little bit faster, whips a little bit faster, and also you're not trying to work with it so quickly because it's such a big batch, you have time to pipe it. So if you're looking to make a lot of marshmallows, you may need to make a couple batches of this recipe. So we need to have all of our stuff ready to go right from the start. Here's what I've got as my piped marshmallow setup. I've got my mixer fitted with the whip attachment. I've got my nonstick spray nearby. I've got my piping bag fitted with a tip. I'm gonna use a pedal tip today to make sort of a ruffly or like ribbony sort of marshmallow. I've got my pot for cooking and all of my ingredients, and then I have a sheet tray that I've generously dusted with powdered sugar. That's where we're gonna pipe our marshmallows onto. The other thing that I have that's super important is a bowl of powdered sugar with a sifter. That way, if I need more powdered sugar at any point during the process, I've got it ready and on hand. Again, it can be helpful to grease some of your tools with nonstick spray so that once the marshmallow is whipped and it's really sticky, we've got something that makes it a little easier to work with. A lot of the same rules as making cut marshmallows are going to apply here. We want to bloom the gelatin, and once it's hydrated, we'll melt it before adding it to the marshmallow. We want to stir the sugar syrup a little bit before we apply heat, and we want to make sure to wash any crystals away from the outside of the pot before they can get into our mixture and make it crystallize and become gritty and grainy. So I've got my water for blooming my gelatin here. I'm just going to pour it in. Then I'll put into my pot my granulated sugar, some water, and some corn syrup. While I stir this, I guess I should point out, of course, I have my vanilla bean paste on hand for adding at the end. I want to make sure it's ready. And if you want to play around with making your marshmallows even more decorative, you can add some gel food coloring to it while it's whipping. So I have some red food coloring here. I'm not actually trying to make red. I'm going to try to make more of a pinky hue by just adding a little bit of it. And once I've kind of given it a head start on combining, I'm going to take it over to the stovetop and we'll start cooking it. I understand that candy making in general can be a little scary. There's something about cooking sugar that scares a lot of people. But one of my little pep talks I want to give is that, you're really just trying to reach a specific temperature. So in that sense, it's actually easier than so many projects in the kitchen where you're trying to determine, is it done? Is it perfect? Is it moist? Is it tender? Is it hydrated? All we have to do with this is stir it. Then stop stirring it and wait until it reads the right temperature. And I find something sort of comforting in that. So yes, it's hot. We want to be safe, have all your things ready. Don't stress yourself out. Don't move too fast. But I think that there's something very rule following about candy making, and that's something I love about it. To cook the syrup, place the pot over medium heat, and you can stir a little bit at the beginning to encourage the sugar to dissolve, but as soon as it starts bubbling, stop stirring. You're gonna need a thermometer to check the temperature. So again, you can use a candy thermometer, which is the safest. Just attach it to the side before you start cooking. Or I like to use my digital probe thermometer. That way I can monitor the temperature throughout and even set an alarm. Boil your sugar syrup until it reads 240 degrees Fahrenheit or 115 degrees Celsius on your thermometer. Then pour it into the bowl of your electric mixer fitted with the whip attachment. Because my recipe for pipeable marshmallows is so much smaller, you don't need to let the syrup cool down at all. We'll just start whipping it right away, but I'm gonna add my vanilla bean paste or vanilla extract and any other flavorings you might wanna use, and the gelatin to it right away. Gradually raise the speed to medium-high and whip until it is light, fluffy, and aerated. With pipeable marshmallows, it's okay for the bowl to still be slightly warm to the touch because we want to keep it workable as long as possible. It'll take about 6 to 8 minutes for the marshmallows to get to the right consistency, and then you want to use your greased spatula to transfer them to your prepared piping bag. You can really do any kind of piping effect that you love with marshmallows that you would do with icing, just as long as you work quickly. So one of my favorites is to do kind of like a ribbony look, or you can even do bows. Using a pedal tip, you want the fatter end of the tip facing your powdered sugar covered sheet and the skinnier part of the tip facing up. And we're just gonna pipe right onto the powdered sugar, and I'm just gonna do little zigzags like this. I'm gonna do a few different variations on this shape because, it's fun. That's the fun of pipeable marshmallow. Once you've finished piping all your marshmallows, you're just gonna give them a little dusting of powdered sugar over the surface. Again, this is just to help prevent them from sticking together once you go to store them. If you're gonna eat some of them right away, the powdered sugar on the bottom is totally fine if you don't wanna ruin your color or your designs, but you only need a little bit, and I think it just adds to the look. I love to make marshmallow stirring sticks, and it's really, really easy to do. You stick the stick into your bag of pipeable marshmallows. I've got a star tip, and then I just squeeze some pressure on the bag and rotate the stick while I pipe the marshmallow. And when I feel like I'm coming to the end, I just stop applying pressure and twist away, and it can sit right on the bed of powdered sugar. And I even used a couple different colors in one bag here so that as I keep piping, I'll end up with some multicolored marshmallow stirrers. They kind of look like unicorn horns too, if you've got any unicorn fans in your house. Okay, I made my marshmallows and I only made a little bit of a mess that I had to wash off my apron. So now it's time to make hot chocolate. I like to think I'm sort of famous for my hot chocolate because I used to make big vats of my recipe when I would have holiday parties or any kind of gathering in the winter. Of course, kids always went nuts for it, but what I found again and again was no matter how big of a vat of cocoa I made, the adults were just loving it and drinking it up. So I'm so excited to share my hot chocolate recipe with you. It's so simple, but it's so delicious and so creamy. My recipe is a mixture of milk, a touch of cream for richness, milk and white chocolates, which again, we're talking about creamy, rich, drinkability. But I also add some cocoa powder to it because I really want to get that rich chocolate flavor. This hot chocolate is silky, smooth, creamy, and immensely chocolatey. It is so good, and I hope you love it as much as I do. To make it, you want to heat your milk and cream until it starts to simmer. While it heats up, you can chop up your chocolates and whisk your cocoa powder and sugar together. Once the milk comes to a simmer, whisk in the cocoa and sugar mixture until it's well combined, then add your chocolates. Continue to mix over low heat, whisking or stirring constantly to make sure you don't scorch any of that chocolate. You really want to keep it in motion. Using a whip will help make the hot chocolate very frothy. It's so, so yummy. Just keep heating it until the whole mixture is smooth, the chocolate is melted, and it all comes together. If it doesn't look smooth at any point, take the whisk back to it and whisk a little more vigorously until it comes back together. Keep it warm until you're ready to serve and then ladle it into mugs. And while you can use any kind of chocolate that you want, this is definitely the time to splurge on something extra special. And if you're more of a dark chocolate person, that's okay too. You can substitute dark chocolate for the milk chocolate in this recipe for a slightly more bitter and intense cocoa. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Happy Baking, where we made classic and pipeable marshmallows and also my famous creamy hot cocoa, which I cannot wait to have some, with a beautiful marshmallow on top. Let's ladle it up. Oh my gosh, it's so rich and smooth. And the marshmallow is like starting to dissolve in it and make it kind of vanilla-y. And oh my gosh, I can't wait. I can't wait to share some of these other marshmallow shapes with my crew and the people that are on set today, and we're gonna have so much fun drinking cocoa. If this episode inspires you to make marshmallows at home, please let me know in the comments or use #HappyBaking on social media. I love to see what you're making in your kitchens. As always, the recipes that I included in this episode are linked in the video description below, or you can find them on my website, ErinJeanneMcDowell.com. So until next time, happy hot cocoa season.